What's up, guys? Messenger of the Cross, Pulse Point Media. I just wanted to say, you guys, many of us, remember the pressure and remember what we were put through during the worldwide medical health scare. And we all remember all the different formal rules, whether real or unreal. I mean, most of the stuff was hard to even believe that they were being serious about, but it's all about taking us to a new low. But all the formal rules and the laws and the mandates and the restrictions, and this is all about the dog training for the plan that they have, the goal that they have worldwide. And that is why I take you to the UN's website and show you the 17, sustainable development goals, which is their declared uh, um, program and tactics basically of inversion on how they seize control and sell us austerity and sell us, this fake utopia that, everyone's going to have all these equal things. And it's just an idealistic, psychopathic delusion that many of these people have that set this stuff up over whole societies. But the main thing is that there are different ways that the global government and the big bankers and everybody else that is on board with Satan's little season, all of these people are agreed together and have pledged their allegiance and have confessed their allegiance to the devil. I mean, whether you believe in the devil or not, it really doesn't matter. That's not the point. The point is that they are going to use artificial crises and real crises under what they call crisis management in order to create the emergency needed to be able to dominate, rule, and control. And if anybody remembers, we had this worldwide health scare, this worldwide health crisis. But it's really funny when you take a look at the mandates, the rules, and the restrictions and the laws that they are basically pushing on all of us. You start to see that it's kind of ironic how, the only solution to a worldwide health crisis are communist tactics and measures taken. But what do I mean by that? Well, I mean, isn't it funny how the only solution that the government can come up with is communism for all of us under a fake emergency rule and to get us used to and dog train us and get us used to having less and less is more, I guess. I guess, having nothing and being happy is what people want. But, it's always for the greater good. And that is why they can get away with making you suffer and making you go without a job, without money, without, a vacation, without any of the things that, our older generations, our family members, parents got to enjoy. But it doesn't matter that they hand us all this debt and try to sink the next generation and just wipe everybody out. I mean, because nobody can take care of themselves, and really, it's just all designed to collapse and implode. But what I'm trying to say is that this all ties into community-based policing. It ties into worldwide communism. And I understand, I'm not, for capitalism or communism. It's just anything that they give us is like, giving us an artificial choice because it's like the liars are the ones, like the fox guarding the hen house. That's basically what we have today. And the very ones that are committing the crimes and doing the problems turn around and pose as the savior to the problems they create. So there was all this social pressure and all these media narratives that made really the unvaccinated people feel, exiled, blamed, and disposable. I mean, that's the bottom line. That is the message that they wanted to communicate, So, formal measures were taken and requirements out of, the rule book that they created for all of us worldwide. And so, it was like, governments, health authorities, and they imposed this on many countries, and everybody was agreed together. Even countries that are supposedly our enemies could get along to do all this stuff together, to do all these measures together. And not every measure happened everywhere, but this is like a full menu that was used that I'm talking about. Like it's like think about a worldwide health scare and just being reduced to only communism being the solution, to only communism. So what do I mean by that? Well, the first thing was, that if you remember, guys, that we had to stay at home. Remember, it was and for many of us, that was like a blessing to us. But to stay at home, there were orders, there were lockdowns, if you remember, turning all of society into a prison in a literal way. And then all in the name of keeping people safe, like I always say, and saving lives. So it was like, you had to stay at home and you got all these stay-at-home orders and lockdowns, except for the absolute essentials. Then they started deciding what's essential and what's not, if you're essential, if you're not, you see. And it just is amazing when you look at the breakdown of what governments and health authorities did, stay at home except for the essentials. You can't go out except to get a little groceries, go to the pharmacy, go get some medical care, maybe. And remember, they shut all the hospitals down, and your essential work. And then they started deciding who's essential or who's not. And remember, guys, as adults, in the name of keeping you safe, there were curfews like your little children. Because, of course, that's going to stop the virus from spreading if, you just are on a curfew, like a little child. At 8 o'clock, you have to go in before the sun comes down, and it's literally like them playing daddy. And people don't understand how insidious this is, but they pretty much banned movement at night in many cities and countries. And this was because they were rolling out the communism under a medical health crisis as the cover to be able to carry out these horrible, horrible measures on the worldwide population. And the countries agreed together to work together to do this. Okay, so they have all this investment together. All the countries that are supposedly our enemies are working together just fine under the emergency health scare, following in lockstep with every mandate, rule, and regulation. Okay, so, it's all about, like I said, in communist countries, exercising your limits over you, creating limits, creating artificial scarcity, and that it doesn't need to exist. It's just a control game and there are resources to go around. Yet the greed is what is responsible for, you know, um, giving us breadcrumbs and sucking up all the assets and everything and the infrastructure of a country, and then just, handing us the mess and the garbage bag, because that's basically what they're doing. And you can only go out certain hours. You can only go a certain amount of miles from your home or be with a number of people, like three people. You can't be with anybody more. And remember, it's all about exercising these limitations over you. So, non-essential movement was banned, if you remember, in a supposed free country and for the sake of keeping people safe. So you can't really, travel for leisure or visiting friends. That's prohibited. That's something that is a no-no, and is frowned upon by these rulers, the same ones that invent the laws that create the community-based policing in the name of keeping people safe. People are being tortured. They're not guilty of a crime. They haven't broken any laws. They have been profile police and are being tortured and murdered, basically just as they are profiled. And then, the games begin. But remember the business and economic shutdown that they did to us. The closure of non-essential businesses, bars, clubs, gyms, salons, theaters, many retail shops shut down, restaurants, indoor dining was banned. You can't do that. Only takeout and delivery was allowed right away, if you remember. But these event venues and concert halls and stadiums and conference centers are closed. And we don't know when they're going to be open again. I mean, this is the way it was done and rolled out, and all with the backing of the fake moral high ground that those that cause the problems are there to be the hero and keep you safe and save lives. Okay? Which is not, in fact, what they're doing. And, it goes on and on. But so there were closure of non-essential businesses, bars, clubs, gyms, salons, and theaters, and many other retail shops. But event venues, there's concert halls closed down, stadiums closed down, conference centers closed down, and workplaces, offices were forced to go remote or shut down entirely. And that is a planned agenda to systematically, piece by piece, take society apart and dismantle not only the United States, but the economy worldwide to push us into their new system. But school and university closures, if you remember, I mean, in-person teaching is suspended. It's all about destroying human connection. And, primary, secondary, and universities just moved online and campus closures, dorms emptied, libraries closed, labs restricted, exams disrupted, standardized tests canceled, postponed, or moved online. And then there was the travel and border controls. Don't you see this is all, to keep things safe and save lives and basically keep everybody healthy? So they made sure to have travel and border controls, international travel bans, flights canceled, entry from certain countries prohibited, mandatory quarantine, on arrival. You know what I mean? Hotel quarantine or home isolation, if you remember, from 7 to 14 days. And there was testing to travel, getting you used to a medical dictatorship worldwide, getting you used to it, training you, making you accustomed to it. Do you understand? So you had to get tested to travel. And remember, the PCR or antigen tests required before boarding or after arrival. And there were domestic travel limits. I mean, the intercity or interstate travel was restricted or banned. You couldn't get more communists to interfere with people's ability to freely associate and be able to do what they want. So communism became the solution, and it was sold as the solution to a medical crisis. And that is how dumbed down the world has really gotten. Like literally, people just accepted that and didn't want to take a look at all the different factors that play into Karl Marx and that play into this type of thing that we're seeing. But travel and border controls, mandatory quarantines, and restricted and banned interstate travel and all these border closures. And if they couldn't impose it, they just threatened it and had the news threaten it, that there were going to be consequences if you didn't go along. So border closures, land and border sealed or heavily controlled. There's all these mask mandates. Indoor mask rules required in shops, offices, and schools, and public transportation. I mean, do you remember the outdoor mask rules as well? Because the indoor weren't enough. They had to make sure everyone was doing the dog training and that they were going to break our will, break us from being able to think about things for ourselves and on our own. And so there were, in some places, outdoor mask rules. And I'll never forget biking on a mountain bike trail in Colorado and seeing dudes that are sweating and, riding their bike really hard like I was, but like with a mask on, with a full surgical mask on. I mean, you're just, basically giving yourself apoxia. But, so it was outdoor mask rules in some places, mask required even outside. So, it's never good enough, and the sacrifice can never be great enough that they will ask you to make. And it's all keeping you looking at the greater good that never comes and just letting you know that, take it on the head, just suffer a little bit for the greater good. This is going to benefit in the future. We're building our future. We're in this together. And that's the way they sell the communism to us as a utopia where there's all these shared things and everything is equally dispersed and we can just have this beautiful utopia across the earth when communism has never been that way, even though that's the way it's sold worldwide. So masks are required outside. Okay. That's what they were doing and saying. Workplace PPE. I mean, certain jobs required surgical masks and even respirators, like the N95 or the FFP2, if you remember. And then, of course, we loved the social distancing rules, including 6 feet apart and only being with, being able to be around two or three people at a time. There is a distance requirement that they imposed on everyone, typically 2 meters or 6 feet between people. I mean, capacity limits, maximum number of people allowed in shops, restaurants, and events. Do you remember the lines? Do you remember the lines that you'd have to stand in when there was no reason for them to do that to you? And these big companies just make you stand outside and get in line. And, like that's going to somehow slow down this airborne thing that was happening, supposedly. And, all these little regulations and rules are going to, flatten the curve, right? So, but, there's all these capacity limits, maximum number of people allowed in shops and restaurants and events. I can't tell you how many places I went that were like that. The quake markers, the tape lines on the floor, the arrows on the floor, keeping people spaced. You remember how controlling it was, how much it damaged your family, damaged your life, damaged your income. Do you remember that? How about gathering bans, where that's what communist countries always want, is to, be able to ban free speech and ban your right to assemble. And, it gave them the perfect excuse, the perfect moral high ground to impose what they prepackaged on us way before this supposed health scare ever even came. They had it all ready to go and planned and strategized in order to take it to the limit and really test this system on us. But limits on private gatherings. If you had 5 to 10 people over at your house, you could get a knock on the door and you might get arrested. If you violate their mandates, which contradict every human right law and every law according to nature. I mean, literally, it's just evil is good and good is evil. That's the type of mentality that these enemies of humanity really have within them. But there's, how about, the testing, the tracing, the isolation, and the quarantine? Mandatory isolation for positive cases, stay home or in uh, designated facilities, quarantine for close contacts, even if asymptomatic. So you don't even have to have symptoms, but you got to quarantine anyways, and you are required to isolate. It is mandatory. And then, the contact tracing. Remember, and this is where the surveillance gets involved even more heavily than it already is with the community-based policing, but the phone calls, apps, interviews were all, to track you and who you have been around, who you're near. And there's mass testing, drive-through testing sites. Remember driving past the big parking lots, these big 501c3 mega church cult parking lots where the pastor's on the payroll of FEMA, and it is a 501c3 cult getting subsidized by the federal government for, federal messaging, you know what I mean, and propaganda. But, there's mass testing, drive-through testing sites, workplace testing that was done periodically, school testing. You see, do you think the people that structured this, that rolled this out on us, really love us and want to keep us safe and save lives? Do you really believe that? Nothing in this world is free, and yet the government wants to give you something free. When, look at how hard they make it for us to take care of ourselves and to have good health in America. And look at how sick they make people. And so the very ones creating the problem, are, with their buddies tag teaming each other, like the food industry and the farm industry are working hand in hand. You know what I mean? And it's just a big cult and a big club. And, like George Carlin said, you're not in it. I mean, basically, and I'm not really into him. I'm just saying his quote, because you're not in it. And you have to be asleep to believe that the American dream ever existed. You have to be asleep, in a dream. And so, but there was just all this, quarantine for close contacts, even when you're not showing symptoms of anything, but you just have to do it because you're keeping people safe. And they got you to accept the measures that didn't make sense because it's all brainwashing and meant to damage you and give up autonomy. That is the goal and the tactics that they're using here during this time and period of our lives. And the reason I'm sharing is because it's going to happen probably again. And usually what they do is roll it out again and again and again because it worked and nobody questioned anything really. So I don't know if you mind, but I mind with strangers and big corporations and government being able to access phone calls, apps, and interviews. I mean, they've been doing it the whole time. We've been trying to say that, but now they want to take it deeper. And there's all these drive-through testing sites. You couldn't even drive down the block. You'd see one church on the corner and then another one. And then there's all this, workplace testing. By the time you get to work, they're asking you to take a test. And it's all about jerking your chain and ratcheting up the confrontation and engagement with you as a citizen. Do you see what I'm saying? So there's all these environmental and hygiene measures, if you remember, that were taken, enhanced cleaning. You'd go into a store and some lady was just scrubbing the counter like crazy, and you're just like, hey, I think that's good enough. I think that is it clean enough for you? Constant disinfection of surfaces in public spaces just makes viruses and bacteria get worse, but that's okay. Hand sanitizer everywhere at entrances and counters and classrooms and buses. And remember the plexiglass barrier that was erected. So whenever you checked out, it was just, the logic behind that. I mean, think about it, guys. It's all about destroying social interaction and our human way of relating to one another and replacing it with something anti-human that doesn't work. So they put up the plexiglass. Of course, the problem couldn't just move around the plexiglass, right? I mean, it couldn't do that. You know what I mean? And these people actually, were masked up and thinking that that plexiglass is going to keep them safe. So there's this barrier psychologically and physically that is imposed. And it's always between customers and staff and between desks. And of course, the ventilation rules, windows open, air filters, CO2 monitoring in some places, so they were going all out with that. And the environmental and hygiene measures that now they're going to tell us, how to be clean, right? Now they're going to tell us how to sanitize entrances and counters and classrooms and buses. And of course, we do know that that plexiglass saved my life. I know it saved your guys' lives, right? I mean, you know what I mean? But like the healthcare system really was, shut down for the most part. I kept waiting for all the people to come and show up at the emergency room at the hospital that I was near in Denver. And, the nurses would come out on their smoke break and they had enough time to make up little dances and do all these things. And you didn't see any cars coming to the emergency room at all or ambulances. It was completely shut down. And they were just saying they're waiting for, people to come with this illness that never came, basically, at least the hospital that I was checking with. So there's these healthcare system restrictions and dog training. And this is where it got so brutal, and this is where it's over the top. The hospital visitation bans, no visitors allowed, patients isolated from their family members, even for serious illness. And then the end of life restrictions. Many people died without even their loved ones present. I mean, just imagine that, guys. And then the maternity restrictions and partners sometimes even banned from being a part of, if you wanted to, at least I don't, but if you wanted to be a part of a birth and see that in person, you were restricted from being able to watch your son or daughter be born. And some people like to do that. I don't know if that's such a great deal, but so the nursing homes then became a place to target our family members and old people in elderly care. And, they would ban you from going and visiting family, long periods where relatives, couldn't enter the facility. I mean, just holding relatives hostage. And what could they not do to us if they just pose as the savior and the hero and the expert keeping us safe? The residents were confined to rooms for long, long periods and limited social interaction and communal activities canceled. So all their communal activities were canceled for months and months and months and months. And just the outings that they have at some of these elderly care facilities were banned. And, elderly people are not allowed to leave for family visits or for trips. And if you do, we're going to have to kick you out of the facility. So this is the type of manipulation and hostage taking, abusive tactics that are used to hijack and force all of civilization, basically, to go along with this prepackaged solution that, as they collapse every other way out, they're just guiding us into this and training us to accept less and less and worse and worse. And that is what they want. So it's like, there were surgery and treatment delays. I mean, I could go on and on. Elective surgeries canceled or postponed, joint replacements, non-urgent procedures delayed, cancer screenings delayed, mammograms, colonoscopies, and other preventative care pushed back months, so you couldn't see a doctor for maybe 3, 4 months. And, all care that was not according to the health scare was deprioritized in a major, major injurious way to other people, in an injurious way to other people, and resources were diverted to the health scare and the wards and ICU capacity, was, to be available for all these so-called people that were going to be coming in, but we never saw it, at least where I was. You know, Again, the media and the news didn't match what I was seeing with my own eyes, but the whole point is don't believe what your eyes see. Don't believe what your ears hear because, it even, when it contradicts everything you know to be true, just on basic logic, just on basic logic. So, you know, there are all these public gathering and event bans, religious services in the churches in America are totally corrupt and horrible and go along with, Jesus wants you to get your vaccine and, all these religious services, churches or even other religions. I mean, just mosques, temples were closed or heavily restricted during these times. Weddings and funerals, limited attendance, sometimes banned entirely or moved online completely. I mean, sport events canceled or held without the spectators there, and concerts and festivals canceled for months and in some places permanently, and there were all these workplace and employment rules, work from home mandates, and then if your job could be done remotely, it often had to be this way, and you were forced to do that even if you didn't want to, staggered shifts, to reduce crowding in workplaces. I mean, workplace testing, regular testing for employees in certain sectors, closure for outbreaks. If there's an outbreak, then next thing you know, workplaces shut down temporarily if cases were detected. And they brought us through this to show us who's boss, who's in control, and who gets to make all of the decisions related to your life and everybody else's life. And that's the way these people that are in control want you to think. They want you to give up on yourself, give up on your own ability to be autonomous, and completely saturate yourself with what you're told and just do it. And, I can't tell you how many people were injured from doing this and listening to the media and what the news was saying, vaccine related policies and mandates, there's just, you know, where the social fracture really sharpened, like the mandates for certain jobs, healthcare workers, teachers, public servants, and in many regions, it's like, do you think any good healthcare worker, nurse, or doctor who is really into helping people is going to be a part of this? No. And that's why there was like record numbers of people quitting the medical system, and we need them there, the good people, but they're just, in a system that drives them out and promotes the evil and the warfare that's being done using the medical system on all of us. But it is weaponized, of course, and there were going to be, remember, the passports, the green passes required to enter required for entry into restaurants, gyms, events, and travel. And there are travel rules, just vaccination required for international travel to avoid quarantine and testing, even though they still did that to you. So they didn't legally necessarily order you to disown your family, but the media was there every day and making, people that didn't want to go along with this unable to attend family events in certain venues, block, relatives from visiting relatives in hospitals or nursing homes, like I said. So it's just all about excluding you from, restaurants, travel, and social life in places with strict passport systems. Go figure, kind of resembles communism as a solution to a medical health crisis. Kind of funny the way that it's like this one solution fits all, I guess. So the effect could feel like if you don't get, along with family and friends who are pushing you and were pushing you to do this, you're cut out of normal life and even from your own family's important moments, especially, and that's the real harm, even if, the literal phrase, get rid of your family wasn't, announced or not announced on the news and it wasn't, a quote unquote formal policy, but in this project lockstep, everyone was working together to, bring about this deep change that we've never recovered from. None of us have. So, and then of course they love the digital surveillance and control measures, contact tracing apps, logged proximity to others, sometimes required to even entry, for entry into places, QR code check-ins. Do you remember your little QR code check-in? Scan to enter shops, restaurants, and events. Don't let that guy get away. We need to take his temperature. And I would never let them put that thing up to my head because it's just weird. And that's just the bottom line. But also, I think that it's bad for you to radiate your brain like that. I believe. So that's just me. But, um, you know, there are all these health status apps and, where they can show test results and it creates this rivalry, and if you can do that and show your status, and show that you're a do-gooder following every jot and tittle. You know what I mean? Like you're basically it's a way of having a way to compare and compete in society. It's the haves, the have-nots. This is the way the divide and conquer always works. But remember the legal penalties that they threaten people with and the enforcement, fines for breaking the rules, for not wearing a mask, breaking quarantine, violating gathering limits. There's going to be police checks, there's going to be roadblocks, there's going to be patrols, there's going to be enforcement of curfews and travel bans and arrests in some cases for repeated and serious violations of standing too close to somebody. So, and you see, it gets more and more ridiculous. It gets more and more ridiculous as it goes on. But there is all this media and social pressure that I'm trying to bring up now and talk about. The part that I'm pointing at, you know, it's like there are the mandates and the rules, and then there are the formal rules, right? And then there's this huge wave of messaging that's done, and it is the shaming of those that did not go along with this, and they are portrayed as selfish and dangerous. And the reason we're still in this mess is what the news was saying. And then family conflict narratives began to arise, talk shows and opinions and different, hit pieces about cutting off anti-vaxxers and not inviting them to your gatherings, etc. And all this moral framing where, this it's like, becomes their moral duty to be the savior and either, make you get it or get rid of you. And just refusal is betrayal of the community and your family is how they wanted it to be felt. So while there wasn't any so-called legal order to get rid of unvaccinated relatives, there was, and stories of people disinviting, family from weddings, holidays, funerals, and alike, and advice columns and, pundits across the board saying things like, you don't have to tolerate your unvaccinated relatives at your home, get rid of them. A climate of hostility where some people felt so pressured to choose between their relationships and or compliance. And every valued and loved thing that you care about was basically held hostage. And that is the bottom line. Everything that you valued, that you loved, that you're attached to, that makes life enjoyable, was entered on the altar. And we were just fighting to try to survive and stay alive. We didn't realize that all these mandates mimic and mirror the imposition of communism and how they impose it on the streets, how they train a society to eventually, surrender and give up to the state being God. And that is what they train people to do. And this is why they take such pains and take such a long time to be able to condition you to accept less and less and less. And pretty soon it's just people that, know this in third world countries, which we've become in the United States. So, that they always are promising great services and this equality for all when that's never what they give. They hijack all the resources and then decide and control those resources to decide who is essential or not, who is going to go along or not. And this is the way that they punish and keep people in check and in line. It is the gang stalking, community-based policing in the United States, which is like a social credit hygiene thing. You understand? It's like if you don't go along with the abuse that they are ordering, then you get penalized for that as well. So it's just this hostage clash of civilizations and of people off against each other, ideas, men versus women, black versus white. It doesn't matter what they put in that little box in their, take a side game that they play. But we as people, we're better than that. We know we're smarter than that. And we don't accept the false choices that are given us. We know that the power structure is deeper in operating and functioning perfectly fine parallel to our quote unquote existing government. We just know that the emergencies have been declared, and under a national emergency, your rights are suspended. That's the bottom line. And anybody can go look that up. As long as we are in a state of declared emergency, your rights are out the door. And that's why they put things like boldly in plain sight, like the Patriot Act, which you can't have two contradictory things that equal the same thing, and one cancels out the other. So when you've got a law passed that directly contradicts on every point the Constitution, and they just roll it out, the Patriot Act, and now we are under that, not the Constitution. Do you understand? Emergency rule, crisis management, crisis, 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 crisis. Collapse control, clean up my mess. Collapse control, clean up my mess. Artificial scarcity, giving you less and less and less over time, conditioning you to accept less and less and less. And then they get on the TV and they say, listen, you as Americans, you're going to have to suffer. And we knew this was coming, but we all have to do our part and pay the price because you don't want your future generation being in this kind of trouble, do you? So we all have to suffer for the greater good. And then the greater good never comes. That's what I'm trying to say is it's complete delusion to think that the government is there to keep you safe and save lives, when actually the more we look at this, the more I point out, the more we see that they're actually doing the exact opposite of that and enjoying it and bragging about it and narcissistic even about it, where they are grandstanding and mocking and putting it in our face again and again and again and wanting to create hostility and conflict. That's what they are all about. That's what they do in other countries. When the CIA gets involved in other countries, then it becomes, a proxy army creation, you know what I mean, where they're out there busy creating, radicals, getting people stirred up and in conflict with one another because, war is big business, you know what I mean? And that's the way these people think. They don't care what's offered up, what's sacrificed, or what's destroyed. They don't care. All they care about is their money. That's all they care about. So that's why we see this taking effect on United States soil where laws are suspended, rights are suspended under an emergency. And with that emergency, there could be an abuser, because under the emergency, you have to give up all rights and all power to the government making the decisions for you. That's just what the laws say. And these laws have been passed, like NDAA. How about the evisceration of the Bill of Rights and Constitution together? How about just reading the Federalist Papers and realizing that we've been lied to about our whole history and that America is not a Christian nation and we never have been really, and that everybody that signed the Declaration of Independence was a Freemason, 33 degree, and this is the facts of reality. We know the way real history is. We know the way um, our society is really run. And that's why I'm here. I'm here to wake you up. I'm here to, I'm here to give you light. I'm here to shine a light on some of these topics and things with the hope that it inspires you to get involved in researching and actually looking into things. Whether we cover the laws that have been passed, we can cover, the tactics that are being used. It's just like on and on and on that we can analyze this stuff every day and find more victory. That is my goal, is to help others find more victory. And, it's like it's an everyday battle, it's an everyday fight. Many of us have our resources hijacked and taken and competed against. And if you were to tell a stranger like that all your resources are being competed against in a vicious, vicious way, people just won't buy that. They just won't believe that. But that's the bottom line, is that each move we make in our energy, there is a contradictory force that has been installed and put in place and is there to police. And citizens in regular clothes, plain clothes, are co-opted into this and are used as weapons against real people that love and care about humanity. You know what I mean? There is no other reason for me to be saying these things but to make you aware that, you think that, well, thank God it's not me that this is happening to, but that is the problem and the chilling effect that comes from this type of yes, no, mine, yours, back down, up, down, mine, yours, right, left, yes, no. They can't equal the same thing. Do you see what I'm saying? So two polar opposites don't mean the same thing, but that's what they want you to accept. One day they say yes, the next day they say no, and the contradiction is so severe that you have to abandon what you think about a topic or an issue. And that is the whole point. And then they just do all these works to prevent you from engaging and being anchored in your own self to be able to even know what's going on and even affect any kind of change. They don't want you to be present with yourself. It's all about dislocating you, dislodging you, removing your autonomy and your independence, whether it's money, whether it's relationships, whether it's health. All these are areas where the new warfare is taking place. And it's right in your backyard. It's when you walk to the car. It's when you go to the park. It's when you go to the stores. The hostility, the following you, the coming and going at the same time as you, no matter what time of the day you come and go, the color sensitizing, the directed speech, the coordinated and organized breakdown, and manufactured street theater abuse. That's not real. And if it wasn't for the coordination and the organized strategic plan to target Americans in these ways, these events of breakdown and collapse would never be happening. So they do the abuse, they hide their hand, and then they pose as a victim when caught or a savior and a hero while not caught, as they begin to grandstand and take so much encouragement with doing wickedness, with doing evil. and doing pain and causing pain and harm and misery and loss and suffering and it is needless. But these types feed off of this stuff, and that is why we're here talking about it. I love you guys. God bless.